So it's finally done. We got official word earlier today how now Microsoft officially owns Bethesda/ZeniMax. This likely happened at some point over the past couple of days. We heard how it got EU approval just on Monday, yesterday. But of course, all this marketing material and the plethora of tweets we saw come out around this take a bit of time to prepare and make. And to go along with this announcement, we got some additional announcements about what's going to be happening in the immediate future, what we could expect a bit in the longer term, as well as some leaks or news from insiders that are probably relevant here. So I want to recap what all of this actually means. Although one thing I do want to mention, because I feel like people keep overlooking this just became a thing. It's not like Bethesda and Microsoft have been working together for the past couple of weeks. Maybe it closed on Friday or maybe on Monday, so they've had a little time to work together, some meetings, but large in part as far as co-development or even just co-planning on future projects, that all begins today. And they even say this in some of the press releases. Now that everything is official, we can begin working together to deliver more great games to everyone. So it's not like we're going to see a huge overhaul for Fallout 76 announced tomorrow, because they have to actually plan and start work on that. With that said though, there are a couple of interesting and important quotes to go over from some of the press releases to come out around this. We do hear how, first, let me say that we're not making any landmark announcements or changes right now. Expectation is that Bethesda Softworks and our studios will continue as we have in the past, just with more support and resources than we've ever had before. That extra support is one of the big ones that I'm really curious to see what happens with in the future, as it could be one of the biggest implications of this, in particular with Bethesda Game Studios. Bethesda Game Studios' future is on a pretty tough schedule, with Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, and now Starfield in the mix. If they continue to take 3 to 4 years to develop games, you're talking about a decade between franchise entries, like a decade plus between Fallout games. And I imagine Microsoft wants to keep those IPs monetized, so I think we could see some spin-off games, perhaps a remake of some of the older titles, or even one of the other big things that support could help out is Fallout 76, just getting more manpower or more content, especially if that next Fallout game isn't coming until the late 2020s or early 2030s, as crazy as that sounds. But in the immediate future, it seems like some of the big changes are going to be coming to Game Pass. As I do say, in the meantime, to properly celebrate this special moment, we are bringing additional Bethesda games into Xbox Game Pass later this week. Stay tuned for more details. This has the potential to actually be pretty big. There are a ton of games not in Game Pass that Bethesda does own. Fallout 4, Fallout 3, almost the entire library of Elder Scrolls games outside of Skyrim, and even some of those other IPs like Prey or the Wolfenstein library would all make really great and fairly large additions to Game Pass on console and PC. So if you are a Game Pass subscriber or just somebody that wants to try out all of the Bethesda games for very cheap, you're going to have that opportunity probably pretty soon. Based on the wording here, it seems like every Bethesda game may not be added immediately, but I imagine the vast majority will be added in a couple of days. But then we get somewhat into those exclusivity talks, where we do hear gamers should know that Xbox consoles, PC, and Game Pass will be the best place to experience new Bethesda games, including some new titles in the future that will be exclusive to Xbox and PC players, which of course is another completely non-concrete answer as to whether or not future Bethesda titles will be exclusive or not. Now, on one hand, they might be saying this because we know some games won't be exclusive to Xbox because they are quite literally exclusive to PlayStation. Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop will only be on PC and PlayStation at launch, so it could be outside of those two games, everything will be exclusive. But to me at least, this very much so seems like it's going to be one of those situations where when a game is announced and you see the title roll as well as all of the platforms it'll be available on, that's when we'll start to get some of those answers. Like, I could see it very realistically taking until the Starfield reveal until we actually find out if Starfield is a Xbox PC exclusive. But then again, with how much of a hot topic it has been, I imagine this will pop up in every interview these guys conduct going forward, so perhaps we do get an answer a bit sooner. But to me at least, if I was going to give my honest impressions of them saying, including some new titles in the future that will be exclusive to Xbox and PC players, that's them kind of throwing it out there that yes, most of these new games coming from Bethesda will in fact be exclusives. Perhaps some of the largest games won't be because they want that PlayStation revenue, or you could even argue the opposite. Perhaps some of the largest games will be because they want to keep people buying Xboxes to play those games. But I would definitely say the safe assumption going forward is, unless it's already confirmed to be on all platforms unless it's an already released game. A new game will be a Xbox/PC exclusive if it's coming from Bethesda. And although it seems like there might be some kind of event on March 11th, this Thursday, it also seems like large in part we're getting some of the big news, the big announcements still at E3 or around E3 season. As they do say, we'll have more to share about what's next for our teams later this year. They also put out this little hype video that a lot of people are over-analyzing, trying to see if it reveals anything, any secret things hidden within. Many people looking at this screen cap, this is in fact Prey, not Starfield, so you can stop over-analyzing this one. But also, there is a statement during this where they do say, games we will make tomorrow, and then they show some footage of The Elder Scrolls 6 as well as the Indiana Jones game. This being footage we've seen in the past, nothing new, but people are saying if they're showing these two as games they will make tomorrow, that must mean Starfield is done. In reality, no, this is likely just differentiating between current full production games versus future titles that are still in pre-production. And in my opinion, I think overanalyzing this trailer is a bit of a waste of time. It doesn't seem like there's much to pick out of it. So although that's large in part the news we got from this particular announcement and some of these press releases, which wasn't much, we also do have this interesting reported March 11th Bethesda event. So 9 times out of 10, I would throw this kind of stuff out, but this comes from Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb was an industry insider. He works for one of the major media outlets who correctly predicted basically all of last summer's events. He typically posts up these mini calendars with all kinds of dates, and again, in 2020, he was extremely accurate with this. So when he does mention that he thinks there'll be some kind of Bethesda Microsoft event on March 11th, this Thursday, I tend to believe him. Now, one of the only things that makes me a bit more reserved about this is it seems to be mentioned nowhere between the correspondence we got today between Microsoft or Bethesda. They mentioned at one point how we'll hear more about some of the games coming to Game Pass later this week, but otherwise there's no mention of some kind of event later this week. So to me, what I would take this to mean is it's going to be a super tiny event. Perhaps even calling it an event is too much. Many people found on Thursday there's going to be this Xbox On stream. This is a weekly thing. They do this all the time. It is in no way related to news or announcements. It's just people from the Xbox team playing video games together, but likely they'll probably have some mini announcements, or perhaps a video will be released, or even as a part of the Major Nelson podcast where they'll talk a bit more about this, actually what games are coming to Game Pass, perhaps a bit more in depth on what this means. One of the other takeaways from this is it seems almost certain that BE3 will still be a separate thing from Microsoft's E3 conference. Bethesda and Microsoft have actually had quite a bit of overlap in their conferences, typically taking place on the same day. Bethesda has made several appearances at Microsoft E3 conferences, but based on the timing of this deal getting approved, like work can only just start today. It seems pretty likely that these two will still be a separate thing. Not to mention, Bethesda has a lot to talk about in this E3 season. Obviously Starfield, if that ends up being a thing, but also likely Starfield Mobile, or even maybe a next-gen Fallout 4, things like Wolfenstein 3, a new ZeniMax Online Studios IP, the Indiana Jones game, the Fallout TV show, whatever is happening next for Fallout 76. We know that last year, around early March, there were concrete plans for BE3. We heard about them briefly in a podcast with Pete Hines. So I have to imagine that the reels are already rolling on this, and BE3 and Microsoft E3, if they're even called that, will still be two somewhat separate things. Otherwise, yeah, that's where things stand right now. We'll probably get some more news this Thursday, although it may be relatively minimal. I imagine if it was going to be a bigger event, they would have at least mentioned it today. And I have a feeling this exclusivity question, the question a lot of people have in their heads, is not going to be getting a clear and concrete answer anytime soon. They'll probably announce it on a case-by-case basis, and I still suspect it'll large in part be true, that basically every new release outside of Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo will be Xbox and Microsoft exclusives. Either way, over the next year and really 2 years, there's a lot to get excited for. I imagine plans are being discussed right now for some pretty exciting things. Perhaps further investment into Fallout 76, perhaps remakes of old games, or maybe even other studios working on some of these IPs that Bethesda owns. Either way though, that's what we know thus far. Hopefully you guys found this one informative, but with that said, I hope to see you all next time. Later.